Hello, welcome. I'm Cynthia Gautreaux, and I'm here today with Julian Jefferies, and he's going to talk to us about a very important topic regarding how to serve undocumented AB540 youth in schools. So welcome, Julian. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Cynthia. Thanks so much for putting this together, and welcome to everybody that's listening, whether now live or in a recorded version. Again, my name is Dr. Julian Jefferies. I'm a professor in literacy and reading education, and I'm here to present to you a topic that I think is very important and very timely, and that is we're going to talk about what experiences and how we can support undocumented and AB540 youth in our K through 12 schools. So today we'll go over what is an undocumented student, how they navigate K through 12 institutions, and I'll go over three very important policies here in California and at the federal level that support undocumented youth. So we'll talk about Assembly Bill 540, AB 540, AB 130 and 131, which is generally called the California DREAM Act. And we'll also talk about Deferred Action for childhood arrivals. Who's eligible, why are these policies important, and what are some of the experiences that undocumented youth have in our high schools. And we'll have some questions later. Let's start with Supreme Court ruling, Plyler versus DOE, which was in 1982. And this was a case that was important because in it, the Supreme Court justices confirmed that undocumented youth, so youth that are brought by their parents at a young age who were not born here and so do not have a social security number, have access to and the right to a K through 12 education, right? And so when we say, well, what is an undocumented student? Well, it's a young person who came to the country at a young age and crossed the border without permission, usually with his parents or with some adult. And so people ask the question, do they have the right to go to school? Of course they do. They have the natural right to an access to education, and basically what Plyler versus DOE did was to support this right. However, even though they have the right to go to schools, we'll see that their numbers in terms of graduating high school and going into the university are really low. But let's look at some other numbers. How many undocumented youth are there in the country? More than 2 million undocumented youth in the United States. 40% of them are in California, so that's why this is an important topic for California. So around 65,000 undocumented students graduate from U.S. high schools every year. And what I mentioned before, many of them have not completed high school. There was a number as high as 40% of youth that are undocumented who are 18 to 24 have not completed high school. And this is a very large number compared to 15%, which is the number of authorized migrants who haven't completed high school, and 8%, which is the number of US-born residents who haven't completed high school. So really taking a look at the experiences of our undocumented youth is very important and urgent. My background, I was a high school educator in Boston for many years, and I worked in an immigrant school and I became interested in this topic, and I did my dissertation about this, and I've been writing about this topic, the experiences of undocumented youth in high school and their transition to after they graduate from high school. And what I found in the school, and you might think about what's happening in your school, is it's kind of what I called it, like a little bit of a delicate dance. I called it like the circle of silence. What happens? Well, there's many factors that have make it so that students do not report that they're undocumented, of course, because there's a lot of fear of deportation. And of course, with the new administration in the last few months, that fear has even gotten bigger. But this fear was still common during the Bush era and during the Obama era. Let's not forget that Obama was the president that up to now has deported the most immigrants. So there's a lot of fear in the immigrant community at deportation, and so students don't want to tell their administrators, their teachers, that they're undocumented. At the same time, administrators are, it's a topic that's taboo and it's politically charged, and so they don't want to talk about it in fear that maybe there's some people in the school that are against immigrant rights, and so it'd be an uncomfortable situation. I found that also parents sometimes don't tell their kids that they're undocumented, or undocumented youth realize this later on when the first time they apply for a job or something like that. And all of these issues that I just talked about, the consequence is that nobody talks about it, right? So we know it's there, but nobody really addresses the fact. And this is unfortunate in many schools because why? Because it's very important to mentor and advise and motivate undocumented youth because of this fear of deportation and because misinformation, sometimes they miss a lot of important information about the fact that yes, they can go to college, and yes, in California they can get some access to financial aid, and in California they can pay in-state tuition. They have that right. And through a federal program, they are sometimes eligible to get a temporary work permit. And so this is what the basis of my presentation today. So if you have, and this presentation is especially relevant for teachers, for people who are thinking about going into teaching, for counselors, for administrators in a school. If you have students that you know are undocumented, or there's an undocumented student group, or there's a student that comes up to you and says, I don't have a social security number, can I go to college? Your answer is going to be yes. And the rest of the presentation is going to be all the policies and documents that they need in order to get in-state tuition at public universities, get access to financial aid, and possibly get a temporary work permit. So that's what I'll talk about. So the first thing that we need to learn is AB540. AB540 was a state law here in the state of California that was passed in 2001 and went into effect in 2002. So it's been more than 15 years. And this allows students who are undocumented and who meet certain requirements to pay in-state tuition at public colleges and universities in California, right? And so this was very significant when it passed. The similar legislation in other states, in like 10 or 12 states, similar legislation was passed. And this law applies for students that are going to a California community college, University of California, or Cal State, like here, Cal State Fullerton. And so what are the requirements? Well, in order for students to be eligible to pay in-state tuition, the state requires that they have attended a school in California, K through 12 school, for at least 3 years, right? So if a student who's undocumented went to school in California for 3 years, it doesn't have to be consecutive. It doesn't have to be the same school. If they went to school here for 3 years and they can prove that, they have access to in-state tuition. And of course, they must have graduated and gotten their GED. And as soon as they are accepted into university and they're enrolled, they can ask to pay in-state tuition, right? So they only fill out this AB540 affidavit. And this is something that they can Google, and you'll find that document. And presented at admissions, and they'll be noted as in-state, to paying in-state tuition instead of out-of-state tuition. And of course, I have numbers from a couple of years ago, but the difference between in-state and out-of-state tuition is, of course, considerable, right? In 2013, California residents paid $3,000, and out-of-state residents paid nearly $8,000. I think that's gone up, but still it's a significant difference. And so it's important to talk to students about this, because, they can understand that they'll have a more financially accessible experience in, public universities with this AB540 law. Now, another concern of students is, I don't want to go to college, or I don't want to do this AB540 thing because they'll have my name and they'll send it to immigration authorities and I'll be deported. I always tell students that this law requires state colleges and universities to keep the students' information confidential, and so their immigration status will not be told to anybody. And so this is important. And also it's important to say that although this assembly bill gives undocumented youth a in-state tuition, it didn't give them financial aid, and it doesn't establish any kind of residency. So it has no benefits apart from that. And so students in these years, although it seemed more accessible, it was still, without financial aid, especially for low-income students, it was still very difficult to attend college. And so it was a beginning, but it didn't quite help students 100% to go to college. And that's where the second legislation that I want to talk about today, it's the California DREAM Act. The California DREAM Act is a legislation that was introduced by Gilbert Cedillo in 2005 and was vetoed by the then Governor Schwarzenegger. But it was brought up a couple of times, and finally it was reintroduced in 2011 by Gil Cedillo again, and it comprised of two assembly bills, AB 130 and 131. And 130 went into effect in 2012 and 131 in 2013. Basically, both of them say that undocumented students are eligible to get private scholarships and also some sort of state financial aid. So the whole thing about private scholarships, that kind of certified something that was true already. A lot of undocumented youth already were applying to private scholarships that didn't require citizenship. So I'll focus on Assembly Bill 131, which is really the California DREAM Act. That allows students met AB540 criteria, so who went to a California, elementary, middle, or high school for 3 years or more, to apply and to receive certain state-funded financial aid programs, right? So things like the UC grant, the State University grant, the EOP program, the Board of Governors fee waivers, Cal grants, Chaffee foster youth grants, so all kinds of state funds. The application is very similar to FAFSA, that is not FAFSA, right? So we really have to be clear with students. If you're undocumented, you do not apply for FAFSA. What you do apply to is to the California DREAM Act. And that is the website right there. It's all online, and the deadline is similar to FAFSA. I think it's the 1st or 2nd of March every year. And we do want to encourage students to apply for the DREAM Act as soon as possible. To start filling it out, I would say December. October, November, December, before that March 1st deadline. The first time that they fill it out, they might need help. And so there's usually, many high schools are giving workshops. Some community organizations are giving workshops. And so if you want to know more information about this, please send me an email. But this is something that, of course, any student has difficulty navigating, filling out a FAFSA or a California DREAM Act application. And that our low-income undocumented students, of course, have this difficulty too. And so it's something that I think it's a good idea for them to ask for support. For the high school to support them, or for a community organization to support them in doing this application. Finally, I want to talk about Deferred Action for childhood arrivals. And you might have heard this is DACA, but this is an executive order that President Obama in 2012 announced. And he said, certain undocumented youth will not be deported and will be eligible for a 2-year work permit. This is a kind of a form of administrative immigration relief, and permits the person to apply for employment. So students that are eligible pay $465, apply to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and they get a work permit for 2 years, which is renewable. Let me go over the very important eligibility requirements. So the application became available in 2012, and so it's been 5 years of this program. And I know a lot of students who have gotten the work permit, and then they've renewed it again. And so it's had an effect on a lot of our undocumented youth, giving them kind of hope that, not only am I going to college, but I may be able to, get a work permit. So basically, there's a certain eligibility requirements. It's not for everybody. So it's between people that are 16 and 30. They must have been in this country since June 5, 2007. They must have arrived before their 16th birthday, and they must be younger than 31 years of age. And also, they have to have had be in school or being graduated from school and not being convicted of a felony, a significant misdemeanor, or 3 or more insignificant misdemeanors, right? And so if students fill all those, youth are eligible for all those requirements, they can get a work permit for 2 years. This does not lead to any kind of residence status or U.S. citizenship at all. It's just a work permit. It's not considered a lawful immigration status. There's no benefits of family members. And of course, it could be terminated. And this was one of the big questions that came up when Donald Trump was elected. Would he end this program? And he hasn't yet, and he hasn't talked about ending it. And so that's up to now, which now is April 3rd, 2017. He has not ended or talked about ending it. And so this program is still working, and students can still apply and get this 2-year work permit. So when they get the permit, after they do the application, they get this employment authorization card that looks like this. So let me go over the 3 very important state laws and federal laws and policies that we need to know in order to serve our undocumented youth in schools. I went over AB540, which is a state California policy that allows undocumented youth who've gone to school here for more than 3 years to get in-state tuition. I've also talked about the California DREAM Act, which allows AB540 students to apply for certain state funds to fund their education. And I've talked about the DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which enables some undocumented youth to get a 2-year work permit and relief from being deported. And this work permit is renewable every 2 years. And so, when students come to you and say, Miss, I don't have papers, or my parents told me I don't have papers, or I don't have a social security number, can I go to college? The question I always say, the answer is always yes, of course you can go to college. And in fact, in State Fullerton, we have more than 1,000 undocumented youth who are attending here. And we have a center that specifically serves undocumented youth, which is called the Titan Dreamers Resource Center. And so there's a lot of support. And so you, as counselors, as teachers, as administrators, have a great opportunity to motivate these youth to go on with their education. I wanted to end the presentation by looking forward, right? Thinking beyond these policies, because of course these policies are not enough, in my opinion. As a scholar of immigration, I think that these are a very partial solution to the issue. It's a very temporary solution for a part of the population. I think that undocumented youth are hardworking, and undocumented immigrants are hardworking, are very much needed by the economy here, performing jobs that the other population doesn't want to do. And so we need to honor the sacrifice and the work that undocumented immigrants do. And instead of doing piecemeal immigration policy like this, I think we should work towards getting them a true pathway to citizenship for all undocumented immigrants here. In schools specifically, I want to call on administrators and teachers, on counselors, to work on these 3 points. The first is awareness. If we don't know that we have undocumented youth, if we don't know what policies are in place, if we don't inform parents, if we don't inform students, if we don't inform teachers, administrators, counselors, our elected officials, I would, of course, it's a difficult question to ask. You don't go up to somebody and say, hey, are you undocumented? Right? It's a conversation that has to be had with a lot of trust in the room. But it's very important for a school to know, to break that circle of silence and to know, okay, how many undocumented youth do we have here? How do we serve them? What information do we need to bring? What experts do we need to bring in? What do teachers need to know? What do counselors need to know? I can't tell you how many undocumented youth I've had that their counselors told them that they couldn't go to college, and that's not true. Or that their teachers didn't know anything about it either. And so that's doing them a disservice. Our counseling has to be different than the regular one. And there has to be some sort of a legal or paralegal side to it for students to be able to navigate some very important and complicated immigration forms. For example, the DACA form is very complicated. But awareness and counseling is not enough. I think that schools need to become a place where we advocate. In this political climate, we advocate for students' rights to education, to work, and to live in peace with their families. And so I think that schools need to become a site of awareness, of counseling, and of advocacy for our undocumented youth. So I think I'll end here, and I'll open it up for questions. So I think that we have some questions already here.
So I have a question.
Great, thanks, Cynthia.
You mentioned about they have a 2-year work permit, students who are eligible, and then what happens after the 2 years? I mean, is there an option for them to gain citizenship? No.
Deferred Action, this is executive order from Obama, has no benefits towards citizenship at all. What they do after 2 years is apply again. So you can imagine that this is a very temporary solution. As you might know, in the last decades, politicians have been trying to get some sort of immigration reform passed, but it has not